You know, I haven't made that big of a secret of it that my final destination was to be retiring in New Zealand. I've offered the letter I wrote to New Zealand, and I've sent it. I've sent it to high officials there, and I can't get a particular response to that letter because it requires thinking. It requires the path of least resistance, a life uncommon. It requires addressing concepts and themes and collaborations that have never happened anywhere really, much less in New Zealand. So if I was to I'm still looking at patterns right from that culture. I don't know enough about it. Like I wish I knew somebody from there that I could be in dialogue with. Um, but if I was to hazard a guess why the prime minister retired, that she might be keeping to herself or private with her husband, is she might have noticed that it's a losing battle, like things are going to get worse. And as much as she, in a large part, as compared to, the roles of politicians in her own country or around the world, she did a very, very good job, but she knows things are going to get worse. For example, let's say the quality of places I'd like to work, let's say in counseling people or in mental health or in education, um, in universities. Let's say it's better there. Okay, and I don't know this for a fact, but let's say it's better there. It's going to get worse. But one way it's going to get worse is when you look at job postings and responses to my communication with them, which is much better than anywhere around the world. I got to say, the efforts made by people to respond to emails, I did notice it's getting a little bit worse in the last few months, but it is still better. There's still actual real people answering you, not as if they read and understood everything I sent, but still the levels of percentages of people answering in a non-automaton robotic way, or not as much in that way, is better there. Now, what if what made things better there in these industries is a rigorous training and certification process that they didn't deviate from, but that had quality at levels better than, let's say, a Canadian society? Well, that concept still has limits. It still won't push off HSD, and it still won't allow them, because of HSD, to, let's say, give somebody like me a try, because that's all I want anywhere, is even though I don't have this certificate, or you want me to get there first, to even consider me for the job, or whatever it is it can't fix itself from the decline. And maybe the PM knows, yes, maybe with her husband she made a list of things that are pros and cons in a way to evaluate for, hey, is it, by the way, I'm just putting this, it's a bit warmer and nice and comfortable, but also to look different, right? So this is a totally different subject and vlog, even though it might be like 10 minutes after I filmed a different one. So what if Jacinda talked to her husband and they made, on a flip chart or dry eraser board, a list of pros and cons, which would be a positive or negative socio-cybernetic feedback loops for their culture, and what she would prioritize in a losing battle, to stay in politics longer, but really see the decline at the cost that, her kid or kids wouldn't be accessible to her as much in this, losing battle, is of course she would say, yeah, my batteries are drained and somebody else can try, but really she'd be preparing her family for the decline of that culture as well, because HSD is everywhere. So let's say, it is great to work in education there, for example, but they would lose the rest of my years before retirement to try to get me to earn these certifications, instead of in a much, much shorter time. And this is the same everywhere, but I believe at this point it's also the case in New Zealand, and making efforts to go there would be a losing battle for me. Is they would not do the easier thing, which is evidence-based, of letting me prove my worth in education, let's say, without these certifications, in a totally transparent way, like a probation period where I am observed by their best. And then they would say, Martin, that's what would happen is you're great. You don't have any of this training or certificates, and we'd like you to do that a little bit longer. We'd like to ask you questions about your success. We'd like to say, try these things as well. We want to evaluate you in these ways. And if so, we're going to give you these certificates if, this is not a fluke so far, that you will also perform extremely well. That would be a self-correcting society, and it doesn't happen anywhere around the world that I've seen. Like, I just sent another resume to a principal that's in a very remote community, and it's not the first time. You could say it might be more than 50 times, I would say, in the last few years, is sometimes they get funding for something where they have no choice but they might be able to get out of Make a Future to hire people, but they still have to, for funding, hire somebody with a BC teacher certificate. Now, these principals, are they really in charge of their schools? If let's say you're already in the community there. Let's say I make my way there and I say, no, I just want to volunteer. Oh, if you're a volunteer, you just need the criminal record check. And then you're with a certified teacher at the same time. And let's say that certified teacher has the courage to say, not what the cowards here say, oh, you're so great, too bad you should go get that certificate. As if the Anthropocene hadn't already started. What a ridiculous thing to say. And what if, let's say, as a volunteer there, I'd be there and a teacher would say, you are amazing. You are better than teachers I've worked with. And let's say she would be somebody who had worked in a few different provinces. Then would the principal there be somebody that can, let's say, hire me and maybe lose that funding, or try to work with the government and say, this guy's great. We have so many evaluations of him by a variety of our staff that are BC certified teachers. Can you give him the equivalency, in this way? And they wouldn't do it. Now, I already have data that this is the extreme likelihood of what would happen. I'm not certain that this would happen in New Zealand, but I'm telling you that this vlog here, particularly about New Zealand culture and the Prime Minister that's on her way out, is likely because the insight that probably she has figured out as well is that things are going to get worse and that she should just focus on the health of her family, because the rest is a losing battle. I mean, she probably will be a consultant, especially if, her party remains in power. And by the way, parties that really represent the labor force, if I understand properly, I don't keep track of all. I'm more of a psychological profiling interest in politicians. But if her party is labor and it protects, the rights of workers, which is under terrorist attack pretty much by their own governments anywhere around the world, most certainly in Canada, is then yes, it'd be nice that she would be maybe helping to fight off the decline of her culture that will still happen because of HSD, but that would be maybe a slowdown. And maybe it'd be slowed down in a way that maybe things would happen in the future. And again, don't have kids with maybes, by the way, as scenarios for the future, because that's child abuse. But anyway, maybe in the future, if they focus on other things, either consciously or accidentally, such as self-reliance as an island or a series of islands, or maybe with other islands. But still, the more it's by themselves, and this is not in communicating with others or learning with each other around the world, but it is related to fulfilling their basic needs. And maybe a little bit of their not so basic needs, like, things you don't necessarily need, but that are, very, very, very pleasant for the health, let's say, of the mind, to partake in activities that aren't required, let's say, as a form of exercise, but it's a part of the culture, or it's a way to stimulate the mind as well as the body, these forms of exercise. This would be an example of not a basic need, but a need that is also adding the resiliency to maybe in the future, and again, radiation that is deadly and going around the globes at certain levels and concentrated in certain places is definitely what is to come in our immediate future, and it will not avoid that part of the world. Although that part of the world may be likely to be a little bit less affected by radiation. But that doesn't mean, if they're still in their import-export things, that a lot of contaminants won't come. I mean, it's already happening if you have scientists measuring for contaminants of different things. I mean, we buy things in dollar stores here that are extremely high percentage of contaminants. So again, the monopoly game of having big boats going everywhere and through this canal and these ships, and they must be protected by armies because the elites are worried if these useless pieces of plastic sink, and we don't save 2 or 3 people that are working on these boats, then they're going to say, hey, maybe we can't sell these useless pieces of plastic that much now because we're not even making efforts to save the people that are the slaves of the elites to make money on these things. Plastic, again, one of the most obvious inventions that we know, but we still don't stop, that proves that we don't have sentience and sapience as a species. And again, politicians that don't make decisions, let's say at this point, I would say at this point, decisions politicians make must reflect what is good for the biosphere. So not just their people or their borders, but the biosphere within the next 300 years. So if we're not there now, I'm telling you, and we're not, because you don't have the knowledge to understand how to think to make these decisions, is the Anthropocene is continuing to speed up and accelerate, and denial is and a lack of accountability is very much related to the paradigms of the magical money and the supernatural religions, where a lot of the people don't fight the fight against the norm that is wrong because they believe, karma or, their gods will take care of the punishment later, although there's never been any evidence for this. And if there was, then, the gods should be punished as well for allowing this flawed human thinking as a way for them to operate as well.